Greetings, SOSW viewers. It is your resident Jedi Knight Luke here with
the always fantastic Captain Henson.
And this is going to be our most quote-unquote ambitious Bad Batch podcast yet, as we are covering episodes 9, 10, 11, and 12 of the Bad Batch Season 2, starting with episode 9, The Crossing. This episode takes place, I assume, not that long really after Truth and Consequences. The Bad Batch, which are now a team of 4, are on an unnamed planet searching for a substance that Sid wants called Ipsium in a mine that she purchased. While doing so, a masked scavenger, who was watching them earlier on in the episode as we saw, hijacks the Marauder as the team get out of the mine. They ultimately lose the Ipsium, though, on their way to the next town due to an antelope stampede and a thunderstorm, which causes the Ipsium to explode, trapping them in another mine that they take shelter in. Omega gets frustrated over Tech's lack of regard about Echo's departure, and she goes off on her own. She discovers more Ipsium in this mine they've just taken shelter in, which Tech eventually helps her to extract. While Hunter and Wrecker clear the entrance, Omega loses her balance on retrieving the last Ipsium sample and falls. Tech follows her, and they slide down a waterfall and find another exit. Hunter and Wrecker find them, and Omega and Tech discuss their feelings about Echo's departure. We see that, under all the intelligence and resilience, Tech does have a heart, and that he does miss Echo, and even Crosshair, just as Omega does. Hunter and Wrecker rejoin them. They blow their way out of the cavern using one of the Ipsium samples, and they find a deserted town. They manage to contact Sid, and they ask for her help, but she shrugs them off and cuts off the transmission. But Omega remains optimistic that they will find a way, and that's how the episode ends.
So, after the heaviness of the previous 2 episodes, I think having a more down-to-earth, character-focused story was needed. I know some people are annoyed with the constant on-again, off-again of continuing the overall story and then these more standalone stories that some have referred to as filler. But as I like these characters, I don't mind it. Especially in this regard, they lost a teammate. And not just any teammate, one who had been on the team before Omega even joined. And of course, this being Echo for those TCW fans, it really is a loss. So we have to deal with the aftermath of that. Omega is a child, so she has to deal with the idea of somebody walking their own path. One could argue that this is even more hard to wrap the head around than death, because at least with death, you know where the person stood, but here, Echo left of his own accord. And I am also glad they acknowledge the fact that some people process, I guess we can call it grief, differently. Tech being the more logistically minded teammate, he doesn't portray his emotions the same as the rest of the Bad Batch. And to an outsider, that may seem like he's uncaring, robotic even. But no, he just has his own way of processing things. And too often we see that this way of portraying oneself is seen as bad, wrong. You're supposed to process events in certain ways. But no, we are told why he is the way he is, how he processes emotions. And we have this nice moment between him and Omega. And this starts his opening up a bit more towards others. Not much to say about the other Bad Batch members. And, of course, I'm happy to see that Omega is still acting like a kid. And, of course, Sid not giving 2 shits about them. My God, who didn't see that one coming?
For me personally, I will put my hands up and admit, I was not the biggest fan of this episode upon first viewing, at least not the first half. But then, It picks up come the latter half, and I enjoyed it a lot more. And upon rewatching it again for this recording, I actually did enjoy this episode a lot more. The characters, as has always been the case with this show, are the main focus here, and seeing the process that they're going through from a mental and emotional standpoint, yes, I do actually see how that was needed. This episode, I think, for most people, will be a bit more of a grower. The interplay between the characters here obviously has a much sadder undertone than it normally does for obvious reasons, and the fact that we finally get some hint of an interpersonal side to Tech. I mean, we definitely needed that. He has always been very matter of fact and still continues to be in the later episodes, mind you. But that moment with Omega was definitely a watershed moment for him, because we realize that he does have a heart. Even amongst all of the resilience, he does feel the effect of both Echo's departure and even Crosshair's. You know, both Omega and Tech learn a great deal from each other here in that conversation. Tech recognizes the importance of being a squad and even a family from a personal standpoint, and Omega recognizes the value of being resilient, which a soldier has to be in order to survive, especially during these times. So it's a win-win. And of course, Sid, well, let's just say I wasn't the biggest fan of her at the end of this. Anything more to say, Henson?
No.
Okay then, so moving swiftly on to episode 10, Retrieval. Picking up right after the previous episode's ending, this one begins the next day with the Bad Batch trying to repair a broken speeder. Omega is actually able to connect to Gonki, as she realizes, who is still on the Marauder. Meanwhile, the young thief, by the name of Benny Barrow, delivers it to his boss, Moko. The Bad Batch find Benny that night, and he begrudgingly guides them through the facility he works at. It turns out that Benny and a bunch of other young slaves are Ipsium miners. Omega and Benny reach the control room and disable the shields of the garage bay where the Marauder is docked. The brothers are repairing the ship, while Mako captures Omega. This was because of Benny discreetly alerting Mako when he and Omega arrived in the control room. Omega is hanging off the edge, and Mako warns the Bad Batch not to shoot, otherwise the entire cavern will come crumbling down. But then Benny calls out Mako for lying to the Ipsium miners, claiming that the Ipsium was degraded, which they found out a few minutes ago it was not. And after a short firefight, Mako falls into the flames, the Bad Batch and Benny say their goodbyes, and the group fly off.
Okay, so this episode went as one would expect a story like this to go. People are clearly enslaved in this place. The guy running the whole thing is clearly keeping all the earnings for himself, lying about the true nature of the business. But, you know, it works. We get to see more stealth from the Bad Batch, which is always a nice change of pace. This one, more than the previous one, is definitely of the standalone variety. The last episode did clearly push our characters forward, but here, not so much. But again, Omega experiences more of the galaxy and seeing just how fucked up it can be. And not much to say here, honestly. It was enjoyable. A nice little side quest, I guess you would say, before getting back into the swing of things.
I actually enjoyed this episode a heck of a lot more than I thought I would have done, considering that within the grand scheme of this season, yes, it is definitely a lot more on the filler side. Marco being the typical holding the employees by a carrot, as it were, feeding them scraps, and the top earner just getting that little bit more than the rest at the end of each week or month or whatever the salary is. You just hate the guy with every fibre of your being. Seeing that the miners do believe it, but of course, come the end of the episode, they realise Marco had just been dangling carrots in front of their faces the entire time and lying about the Ipsium being degraded and what have you. And I didn't think I would like Benny as a character that much. Being honest, I absolutely hated him to start with, but I will admit he won me over by the end of the episode. Do you remember in the episode 4 segment of the 4 and 5 podcast, Henson, where you talked about the guy voicing Teo?
Ben Schwartz.
Well, here we actually have another guest star, because the voice of the main young miner, Benny, and the voice of another miner in this episode is none other than Ben Tennyson, and in more recent years in the gaming world, Spider-Man himself, Yuri freaking Lowenthal.
Yeah,
And
something we have discussed in previous episodes is that, yeah, there's a good chance that in every episode you're going to hear a voice that you recognize. Because this show has a lot of guest stars.
can I just
And
say,
Yuri Lowenthal is, I would say, a pretty prolific voice actor, so it's not surprising to see him here.
yeah, and can I just say, I think he did a fantastic job as Benny.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the younger characters, they can be hit or miss for me. And he was the type that I found rather annoying throughout. But, he served a purpose. And it was so nice to see his whole world crumble beneath him when he saw that, oh, yeah, my boss is kind of a dick.
Not in the least because of leading all the young miners by, as I say, dangling a carrot, which is barely worth it at all, and as you mentioned, lying about the nature of the business by claiming that the Ipsium was degraded when it wasn't. Needless to say, Mako got the fate he deserved by the end of that.
Yep. Always nice to see a villain die.
Anything more to say, Henson?
No.
Okay, moving swiftly on. Episode 11, Metamorphosis. This episode begins in probably the creepiest way any Bad Batch episode has opened so far, with a barely functional ruined ship exiting hyperspace and a lone clone commando, most likely the last of the crew, being eaten by an unknown monster. We then transition to Wayland, and a former Republic, now Imperial scientist, Dr. Royce Hemlock, is asked to speak with Nala Se to see if she will cooperate with producing clones for the Empire. However, Nala Se knows what the Empire did to Camino and isn't willing to take their crap. Meanwhile, the Bad Batch convince Sid to begrudgingly give them a 50% payment cut for this next assignment, and are actually contemplating severing ties with Sid for the previous neglect. They find the downed ship, extract data from its logs, and encounter a couple of small beasts that they realize are feeding on energy. They exit the ship, fly off, and we see a grown Zillo beast feeding off the energy tower. Yep, they're back. Some Imperials take the beast and begin experimenting on it, while the Bad Batch look at the data they retrieved. Back on Wayland, Dr. Hemlock meets with Lama Su, who has just arrived there, and Lama Su explains to Hemlock his best chance of getting Nala Se to cooperate is to capture, quote-unquote, a young girl. Of course, we know he is talking about Omega there. Hemlock agrees to do so, and the episode ends.
13 years. 13 motherfucking years it took us to finally get a continuation of the Zillo Beast cloning plotline. April 2010. I remember Dave Filoni joking that, oh, maybe we'll see the Zillo Beast pop up in season 7 or something. And then, of course, me waiting and waiting and waiting to finally see this clone or whatever the hell would come of it. And then just, it suddenly just pops up here. I wasn't even thinking about it popping up in this show. With the focus this show has on cloning. Should have crossed my mind, but it fucking didn't. But, oh, man. Did it feel good to finally get some kind of conclusion on that?
Why was the Zillo Beast cloned, exactly?
Impenetrable armor for skin. But, for what exact purpose, I don't think we know. And hopefully we get more on this, because the Zillo Beast is captured again. The Empire has it. So I hope we find out what the fuck they want to do with it.
This episode is probably my favourite of the four we're discussing. The very beginning of this episode, for a family friendly show like this, that was quite ominous, you know. The discussion on the Marauder with, the Bad Batch lecturing Sid for the neglect she showed toward them. Not a big fan of Sid at the moment, and I think she really is testing her luck, and I don't care that she's got credits at the forefront of her mind. The Bad Batch have been her willing errand squad, in most cases at least, for every trivial thing she's asked them to do, and has even helped her out of a couple of snags with notable former acquaintances. And even after that, she can't be bothered to pick them up when they're stranded. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that despite all the time she spent with the Bad Batch, she's still a criminal. She still doesn't care that much about them. At least that's my reading. Now, my theory would be that eventually, yes, they are gonna leave her for good. That's gonna cause problems. They'll blow heads, but she will redeem herself. How all that will play out, don't know yet, but I'm calling it now. If she does screw them over, she will redeem herself. That's just how the shit usually goes. Now, I wouldn't want that to happen because I'm sick of that trope, but we'll see. I'm just fanboying about the Zillow Beast because, again, 13 fucking years.
Finding the downed ship, extracting the data from the logs, and the encounter that the Bad Batch have with the smaller Zillow beasts inside that ship. That was a very cool sequence. Seeing the fully grown one feed from the tower was great. I do wonder exactly what the Empire will be doing in the experiment department with it. And just a couple more things before we transition. We've seen a certain clone commando a couple of times now. Once in Season 1, Episode 14, and we see him again on a couple of occasions here. A clone commando with yellow and black markings. And he's not referred to either by his name or CT or Delta number, but could that be Scorch?
A lot of the clone commandos in this show look the same, so. And is it just me? Or are the commandos not treated that good in this show?
We've hardly even seen them fire blaster shots, let alone actually be the badasses that they're supposed to be in this show.
Yeah, if I didn't know what commandos were, I would not be impressed with them here. You know what? Yes, throw in Delta Squad, and let's see how the hell they're treated. And I assure you, people will be pissed if they are treated the way commandos have been treated so far.
So if that is indeed Scorch, and if it was in fact him who got casually stunned out of commission in War Mantle, yeah, that's definitely gonna piss some people off, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the final thing, the conversation between Lamassu and Dr. Hemlock. Lamassu has no regrets over wanting to go after Omega, and, as I said earlier, has instructed Hemlock to capture her and use her as leverage to, quote-unquote, motivate Nalase to work for the Empire. Something tells me that's not gonna
happen.
Yeah.
Happy to see that, the aftermath of Kamino's destruction is still playing a huge role in the series. Shit still feels important despite having happened several episodes ago. Things are building upon each other. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I like seeing that. The universe is still continuing forward based on the events that have happened and continue to happen.
And
we still need to see why Omega is so important. Because all we know right now is that for whatever fucking reason, the Kaminoans decide to create a female clone of Jango Fett. An unaltered clone of Jango Fett. Why?
Do you think the task of capturing Omega is a
seed being planted for the season finale? Because something tells me that it is.
How many episodes do we got left?
Not counting the one we're about to discuss since it's already out, we've got 3 more episodes that are still coming.
Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if we get one more one-off, and then the last 2 episodes are going to be dealing with the Empire trying to capture Omega.
Is that it for that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, episode 12, The Outpost. The episode begins on Coruscant, with Crosshair arriving on the landing zone. A new Imperial lieutenant, Nolan, leads Crosshair and a couple of other clones on a mission to the planet Barton 4, the goal of the mission being to find and secure some valuable stolen cargo. They arrive at the outpost and are greeted by Clone Commander Mayday and the 2 clones who are left of his squad. After quickly putting Lieutenant Nolan in his place, due to his lack of experience as a commanding officer, Mayday and Crosshair soon become acquainted. However, the outpost falls victim to another ambush. I say another due to what's explained earlier on in the episode, and Mayday's last 2 men are killed. Nolan then forces Mayday and Crosshair to retrieve the cargo themselves. They end up suffering through probably the coldest HE double hell of a journey imaginable, complete with a treacherous mine and falling snow avalanches, only to realise that the cargo itself is nothing more than stormtrooper armour. The 2 are swarmed by another avalanche, which Mayday suffers the worst of, and Mayday tells Crosshair to leave him behind. However, Crosshair can't bring himself to do that. He assists
Mayday
the entire journey back, which then lasts the rest of that night, the whole of the next day, and the whole of that night. So it's implied to take just over a full day, and Mayday dies because of Lieutenant Nolan's neglect. Crosshair is furious, and he tricks Nolan into thinking that Crosshair wants to talk to him, thus killing him. Crosshair then passes out as the stormtroopers surround him. He wakes up again, though not for long, on a medical table. He is told to remain calm by the female scientist. He is syringed in the neck, and he passes out again, thus ending the episode.
So, once again, I'm happy to see the Empire being portrayed as uncaring as all hell to the soldiers in their ranks, and also showing that war is indeed hell, even though there isn't a war happening. The lengths they go to protect stormtrooper armor, I guess just armor period, compared to the lives lost, or lives that could be lost, it's like, yes, that's exactly what they would do. And what's funny is that, yeah, it's one thing to say, oh, risk your lives for armor. It's another thing to say risk your lives for stormtrooper armor, because canonically speaking, that armor is weaker than clone armor, which just makes it even worse. But the shock of all shocks, Crosshair is slowly but surely waking up to just how much it sucks to work with the Empire. Now, I've said before on this channel that I am so sick of that plot line of the Imperial realizing how much the Empire sucks and then turning. My hope is that Crosshair doesn't return to the Bad Batch, though I'm sure he will. Even if he does, fully, renounce the Empire, I'd prefer him to, be a bounty hunter or something. Be his own person to try and figure himself out, not, immediately rejoin the Bad Batch.
This episode is probably my second favourite out of the 4 that we've discussed here. Of course, seeing Crosshair again was fantastic, and I think what he's been through in this episode is the step that is almost gonna set him over the edge in terms of being willing to work for the Empire any longer. Oh, and by the way, Lieutenant Nolan, I'm so happy he met the fate that he did. Before they even set off, he remarks to Crosshair, "I don't like used equipment," talking about the clones themselves there. He has no empathy. Crosshair and Mayday risk their lives to retrieve stormtrooper armor. Extremely weak infantry armor is what they care about more than the lives of the actual soldiers. So Mayday putting Nolan in his place the way he did at the beginning, and the fact that Crosshair kills him off, yeah, I was very pleased with that. And I am happy that Crosshair has had another chink in his armor, but this time I think all it's going to take is maybe one more serious misstep. Because bear in mind, we've gone from the Empire leaving him for dead in Season 1 to now having seen a fellow clone die in front of him because of the Empire's neglect. And I honestly think that all it would take at this stage is for one of his brothers, or maybe even his sister, referring to the Bad Batch, of course, there, to be hurt by the Empire physically in some way for him to renounce them.
I will say this, thinking on it. Latest episode of Mandalorian, we saw the use of a mind flare on a character. And with that in mind, seeing that Crosshair is in the hands of the scientists, good chance they'll fuck his mind and turn him into a far more obedient soldier. Like, basically erase him of his entire personality. Get sent off to capture Omega and bada bing bada boom, the finale.
Just on a side note, even though we only had one episode with him, I really did actually like Mayday, and was very sad that he ended up biting the dust.
I'm always happy to see an exploration of the clones, even though much prefer the original EU portrayal. What we did get in TCW did bring a lot of interesting ideas to the table. And of course, in a post-Clone Wars era within the universe, that's just ripe with story potential, so I'm on board. Especially, now that they don't have a war, well, they just get dumped on assignments like this. An outpost in the middle of nowhere, and the Empire couldn't give less of a shit about making sure they're prepared for anything, so everyone around them fucking dies, and they kind of just have to hope for the best. Knowing full well that, there's no fucking hope. But, gotta follow orders. So, oh well.
Needless to say, I think Crosshair is, as I've already said, pretty close to defecting at this point, and I'm going to hedge my bets and say that in the finale, that's probably where it's going to be. Anything more to say, Henson?
No.
Okay then, so, in conclusion, all of these episodes I thought were surprisingly brilliant. Fantastic voice acting, fantastic animation quality, as always. The stories I thought were surprisingly compelling, especially given the more fillery nature of one or two of them. Just with every episode, the crew have been bringing their A game, and, well, we're on the home stretch. Let's just hope that it keeps up.
So, overall, had a great time with these episodes. More character exploration, more world building, and the fucking Zillow Beast. Enough said.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been your host for this video, Jedi Knight Luke, with
the always fantastic Captain Henson.
And this has been our review of episodes 9, 10, 11, and 12 of The Bad Batch Season 2. We will see you guys next time. May the Force be with you.
Sayonara.